when we go back to the origins of the word compassion. If you go back to the Latin root, it comes from two words, which means suffer and with. The word com means with or alongside, and passion is about suffering or struggling. Remember that movie, The Passion of the Christ? The whole idea was, let's tell this story emphasizing the struggle, the suffer. So if you look at compassion meaning to suffer with or struggle with, that's a whole new different way of conceptualizing what that really means for us in relationships, because life is hard, it's struggle. Difficult conversations are hard, conflict is hard, performance management is hard. So what would it look like if we did it with people instead of against them? Now all of a sudden accountability is actually part of the process.
Hello, friends. It's good to be with you. I'm Scott, founder of Changing Work, where our mission here at Changing Work is to change work from the inside out. And I am joined today by Nate Regeir. Hi, Nate. How are you doing today?
Great, Scott. Good to see you. Good to be with you and your listeners today.
Awesome. So Nate is the CEO and founder of Next Element, a global leadership firm helping build cultures of compassionate accountability. And he's a former practicing psychologist and has written several books, including one that is coming out this week called Compassionate Accountability. And he also hosts the podcast On Compassion with Dr. Nate. Awesome. Here it is right here. And you've got the big banner behind you.
Got the big one.
I love it. Okay, so we're going to dive in. We're just going to go for it. Compassionate accountability. What does that mean, and why are you writing about it?
Oh, right. So we put these two words together for the first time somewhere around 2015, 2016. And every time people see the two words together, they have the same reaction. Right at first, they're like, what? And then once it soaks in, they go, that would be amazing.
Right.
And so this whole idea is compassion and accountability so often are seen as somehow in tension, somehow at odds, and they don't have to be. And so we've been practicing imagining a world and imagining relationships where they work hand in hand in unison and work together. And so this book is really about how that's come to be and how you do it.
Beautiful. And for listeners, if you're with us on LinkedIn Live, feel free to ask questions in the chat, in the comments, and we'll be able to see those and interact as well. Interestingly enough, I did a poll on LinkedIn in preparation for our event. I asked people, when you hear someone described as a compassionate leader, what's your first instinct? So 130 people voted. You can still vote if you find my post on LinkedIn. And what I was expecting is kind of this first answer. People skills, but results. But only 15% said that. 64% said, awesome. All leaders should be compassionate. And 18% said, probably drives amazing results. And so my question to you, Nate, is do you think that we have progressed in our ability to think about compassion in the workplace?
Oh, that's an amazing poll, and it reveals an interesting dynamic going on, but also it talks about the evolution of compassion in the work. We did a poll 2 days ago during the launch of my book where we asked about 60 people, when it comes to compassion versus accountability, which one do you find most challenging? And something like 80% said, I find accountability most challenging.
Oh, interesting.
So that's pretty consistent with yours, where maybe only 18% said accountability is something you think of when you think of compassion.
Yeah.
And sadly, when push comes to shove, everyone will choose one over the other. It's in our instinct, it's in our tendency, it's in our personalities that when push comes to shove, it's kind of like fight or flight.
Interesting.
And that's unfortunate. But when it comes down to it, that's what we see is the higher up you go in organizations, typically the more people will choose accountability over compassion, even though the research is getting stronger and stronger and stronger, that compassion is really the pathway to great results.
Interesting. Let's tease this out. I think this is really important because I had not thought about that as it being binary. But is it that compassion is I'm solving for the relationship, and accountability is I'm solving for the task. Is it that simple?
That is generally how people, when it comes down to it and they feel like they have to choose, that's how they see it. People will often side with compassion being, let's preserve the relationship, versus accountability is, we need to get results. Even if the relationship suffers, that's a necessary evil or a kind of collateral damage.
Right. So I know that you've thought about this a lot. So what's the shortcut? How do we have both things?
The shortcut is revealed when we go back to the origins of the word compassion. I think the fact that you didn't see them as binary says a lot about why you're such a leader in this field and why you've done so many amazing things, is that when you go back to really the root, if you go back to the Latin root, it comes from two words, which means suffer and with. The word com means with or alongside, and passion is about suffering or struggling. Remember that movie, The Passion of the Christ? The whole idea was, let's tell this story emphasizing the struggle, the suffer. So if you look at compassion meaning to suffer with or struggle with, that's a whole new different way of conceptualizing what that really means for us in relationships, because life is hard, it's struggle. Difficult conversations are hard. Conflict is hard. Performance management is hard. So what would it look like if we did it with people instead of against them? Now, all of a sudden, accountability is actually part of the process.
Interesting. And so if you're a leader and you want to practice this and you haven't quite gotten there, I mean, I know one of the things in your book, Compassion and Accountability, is kind of a playbook on how to do this. So what are some of the ways that as a leader we can keep these two things in mind?
Yeah. First, it starts with kind of evolving our definition and understanding of compassion. And our working definition is that compassion is the practice of demonstrating that people are valuable, capable, and responsible in every interaction. And this really is the beginning of the playbook, because if we break it down, there's three parts to this. The practice of demonstrating. Compassion is a daily practice that is revealed through our behaviors with each other, and we have to show it. What are we demonstrating? Well, traditional, I think old school compassion was people are valuable. Everyone's great. Everyone's deserving of empathy and support. Well, humans are also capable. We're agentic beings with skills and abilities and the desire to contribute. And human beings are also responsible. We work in communities where our behavior matters. It impacts each other. We have goals. We come together to achieve big things. So first, the playbook starts with saying that all three of these are critical, and we have to be affirming and valuing and lifting those three things up in every interaction.
Three things. Could you say the three things again? I think this is really important.
Value, capability, and responsibility. Three aspects of what compassionate accountability is. Right. And we kind of conceptualize them like switches, like you got to turn it on and believe it before you can show it through your behavior.
Let's break it down. So let's take value. What's an example of me turning on my value switch?
It starts with accepting the fundamental truth that all humans are unconditionally valuable and worthwhile. It's not dependent on our behavior. It's not dependent on where we're from or our gender or our particular class of diversity. We are inherently worthwhile. So what that means then is through our behaviors is we see people's experiences as worthy, as legitimate, as valuable, not to be judged. So it's usually a much more human emotional connection that we make. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't talk about behavior, but it means we separate the human being from the behavior. That's what it means to have our switch on.
Interesting. And I think, I talk a lot about curiosity. It seems like curiosity for others is a really important skill here, as I'm seeing everyone as valuable instead of just like players in my big play.
Yeah. Yeah, curiosity can kind of come off in a couple different ways. There's intellectual curiosity, which comes at the capability switch. But then there's curiosity that's more just, I'm so interested in you. Not so much, I'm interested in your ideas, but when you say, hey, when I say to someone, look, I've not ever walked in your shoes and I never will, but I care about your experience. I'm so curious about what it's like to be you in this room right now.
Yeah.
That's an emotional curiosity. It's very different than, God, I'd love to hear more about your ideas.
That's right. I love this quote from Abraham Lincoln, 16th president of the U.S., during the greatest division in U.S. history, during the Civil War. He said, I'll paraphrase, he goes, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better."
Yeah.
And it feels like this is kind of at the root of what you're talking about with value, just seeing others as value and really understanding them as a person.
Absolutely.
Okay, so value is the first one. What's the second one?
Capability.
All right, tell me more about that as a leader. Like, what am I trying?
Right.
What am I focusing on?
So every switch is necessary, but not sufficient. So capability, when that switch is on, we are embracing the fundamental truth that anyone can contribute under the right circumstances. So what that means is now we start to say, what are you good at? What do you care about? Where could we put you so that you could thrive? What can we teach you, mentor, learn, challenge, give you opportunities to learn and grow, and then also fail forward? I love to say that capability is built when we fail often, fail spectacularly, and fail forward. So creating a safe place for that to happen. Rather than, and if you've heard of the abundance mindset or the growth mindset, those tend to come in at capability when the switch is on, as we like, hey, there's no limit to what we can learn and grow when we really invest in each other and believe in each other.
Awesome. And I see we have a question with Natalie. Hold on to that one, Natalie. I'm going to finish our three things here. So value, capability, and the third one is?
It's responsibility. And this one, you may think the highly accountable people don't struggle with this, but they do, because when this switch is turned on, we accept the fundamental truth that everyone is 100% responsible for their thoughts, feelings, and actions. Ooh. No more and no less. And that's where the troubles happen, because when the switch is turned off, we attempt to isolate responsibility, meaning let's point fingers, let's do a root cause analysis on our relationship and why you can't load the dishwasher right. So it's all about pointing fingers. It could be at ourselves. Like we're always taking blame for stuff that we should not be owning. We should be sharing responsibility because, I didn't do all of this. So it's really a fine line about what it means to take 100% responsibility for my thoughts, my feelings, and my behaviors. No more, no less.
So as a leader, let's say you're on a team and this last one, responsibility, gets squirrely. Maybe not within myself, although that's probably for sure, but within my team. Like, how can I lead the team and help people along that journey with responsibility?
Let's say that someone comes to me and says, hey, so-and-so is not doing their part. I'm always picking up the slack on this group project. Typical thing. They want me as the leader to somehow go fix it. What I know as a leader, if my switches are on, is I'm not responsible for their feelings about the situation or what they do next. I'm responsible for how I lead them in this situation. So what I might say is, gosh, that's hard. I can remember times when I felt like I was doing all the work. What resources do you need to be able to deal with this directly? I'll support you in talking to your teammate, but I won't do it for you, because ultimately this relationship is your responsibility and the results are between the two of you. Yeah. All three switches on.
Cool. Right. So we have a deep understanding, but we're also, holding ourselves and the team accountable. Cool. Natalie asks, I'll paraphrase this a little bit. Well, what will it take to change the scorecard? In other words, how do people get promoted? How do people be successful as leaders? And do you think that current organizations are requiring both compassion and accountability in their leaders that are moving up?
Some are trying, but they don't have the tools. They don't have the metrics. They don't have ways of measuring the behavior. I wrote a blog post about a year ago that was called How to Hire for a Compassion Mindset. And it's very specific. What are the behavioral interviewing questions to assess all three switches with demonstrable results? And also, I don't think in our performance conversations or our performance evaluations or our talent, how we move up in talent, we don't build in equal measurable behavioral metrics for each one of those. I love working with leaders around that, because most are not used to how do you measure compassion? How does that show up on the scorecard? And we can do that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic, because I think this is it, right? People have this idea. They of course, it sounds great, but I think what you're talking about is the doing gap.
Yeah.
Like I know I want to do it, but what do I actually do? And so I think that the work you're doing is amazing to actually give people real examples and models that can help them get from A to B?
Yeah. Well, the good news, Scott, is that compassion is learnable. It's teachable. So it's not just, well, some people have it, some people don't. We have the data to prove it. People can learn it and can do good at it, and they can get results right away.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sharman has a question about value. So this idea of treating everybody as equal humans, how do we do that, especially at different stages of development? And how do we minimize hierarchy and status when we do that?
Well, I don't think hierarchy and status per se is the problem. It's how it's used is the problem. If I'm your supervisor, it's not a problem that I'm maybe over a department and I have a scope of responsibility. I have different accountabilities than you do. But when we have our conversations and my switches are on, I can talk to you and say, man, you know, it looks like you're struggling. I remember what that was like when I started. Empathy, right? And here's what we're seeing in terms of your performance. My role is to make sure that we close that gap. So I'm here to resource you if you need that. Ultimately, though, here are the deliverables and here's the consequences if you don't meet them. And my job is to enforce those, but not do it for you. And I'm here for you. So in that conversation, clearly I'm doing my role. I have a hierarchy difference between that person, and our switches are on.
Sure. Maybe to take it a different way, as the organization looks at all as its people, do you think that they value, the people with more hierarchy, higher up hierarchy and status than they do at let's say the bottom of the pyramid?
I think it's easy to do that, is to value. The conditional value is based on something like years of experience or, how many awards you've got, whatever. And it's a challenge because we want to incentivize learning and growth, and we want people to have a path forward in the organization, but we also can at the same time be sending the message that's where you are makes you not okay or less okay. For sure.
So this is a fantastic conversation generally about compassion and accountability. How do you think it's different from some of the other concepts that we've had, things like radical candor or difficult conversations? Like, how is this different?
I believe any framework or model that helps people have necessary conflict in a healthy way is valuable. So I'm not going to criticize any other models. What I can tell you is what our clients have told us when they have experienced what we're doing. One of the things that is different is compassionate is not an adjective to soften accountability.
I like that. Compassion is not an adjective to soften accountability.
So when I say compassionate accountability, I'm not saying we're going to help you have hard conversations with a soft edge. We're talking about this is a fundamentally different way of being with people that is transformative. So radical candor is kind of like saying, look, you just got to tell the truth. And I've seen people say, hey, I'm just telling it like it is, but they're doing it in a way with their switch of value off and their switch of capability off. It's like being honest and a jerk is not radical
candor. Upgrade.
Yeah, it's not an upgrade. On the other end of the spectrum, we see people that have been exposed to frameworks where it's like, here's a prescribed thing to say. Go say this. And it's like, well, I say it, but I don't really get what's happening here. And it's really it's not just about what we say, it's about who we are with each other in these tough places and how we walk into conflict or into tough conversations with the right mindset. And so those are some of the ways in which people are saying this really feels different.
I love it. Do you have any stories maybe you could share from your clients or your own experience of like the before and after, or, how putting this into action makes a difference in their workplace?
Yeah, there's a story that I tell in the book about one of the largest car rental companies in the US. And we worked with 250 of their regional call center managers who were tasked with virtually supporting all of the reps, taking calls, dealing with conflict all day, every day. And the relationships between the managers and their call reps was really strained. They said it's like picking scabs. It's like I'm drained every time I have a conversation, but they're not meeting their metrics and we're trying to increase performance. And I just help them and help them and help them. And maybe they'll meet their goals for a little bit and then they backslide. And I just feel so drained. So we evaluated all of their interactions, where they were struggling, what was going on through the lens of which switches were turned on and which ones were turned off and for who. And what we learned, we were able to analyze the situation and make very, like, say, right here, your switch for yourself is turned off. So if you turned it on, what would it look like? And here you've turned your switch on for yourself, but not for them. And with a few little tweaks, what they did is they changed the way the conversations happened. And within about 6 months, they were saying things like, I'm looking forward to my conversations. Instead of picking scabs, I really feel like we're in this together. Reps were changing their performance metrics and actually coaching each other now on how to meet and sustain their goals. So those are the kinds of things where we could really get to the precise, where is the root of the problem on which switch, and then how do we change behavior, and then we can see results.
I love it. I love the simplicity of it, right? This idea that there's switches for 3 or 4 things, that is super useful in an organization that is busy and nobody has time to figure it out, but you give them something simple and we can all put that into practice. In your book, you talk about, I love this line, compassion is a choice, not a mandate. Can you talk more about that?
I wish I could take credit for that. I was so inspired by that statement from Jonathan Kaiser, who I interviewed for my podcast. It is, because for us to have a mindset of compassion, a mindset is a choice. It's an attitude. It's not something we're forced to do. And if we go into it feeling like, oh, now I got to be nice, or like, whatever, it's going to show. It's not deep inside. All of us have done personal work, and we have uncovered areas inside of us where we had work to do with our relationship with ourselves, or maybe our relationship with other people, before we could be authentic and truly give our whole selves to a relationship. So I think we have to make the choice. And if I can't make the choice, if I can't turn that switch on, acknowledge it, own it. And just say my behavior is showing that my switch is off now. It's something I want to work on, and I'm struggling right now. So
if you're a senior leader and you've seen the light about compassion and accountability, and you want to drive it through your organization with this thought in mind that it can't be a mandate, it's a choice.
Right.
How do we lead people to this thing? Because it's different than work has been for the last 50,000 years.
Nobody has asked me that question yet in that way. And I've been on a lot of podcasts. Thank you so much. And Natalie, David Rock is genius. I heard him speak recently at a conference, and I'm totally with you. So in the implementation section of the book, we start with this whole lay out a plan for how do you establish behavior norms in an organization? How are we going to be with each other? And it's a co-creation process. And we have yet to see organizations where people don't want to have switches on as a general code of conduct. But we call it behavior norms because we're owning it, we're creating it together, and then we're using compassion, accountability to enforce it. And that forms the foundation. And then we can start looking at our processes, our procedures, our strategies in that way.
Cool. Friends, if you're watching live, if you have some questions, let us know. We just have a few more minutes, but I also saw in the book, Nate, I appreciate this. You said that compassion accountability can change the world, and you give some examples. How do you think that this can have a big impact?
In one of my previous books, Conflict Without Casualties, I suggested that conflict is the greatest energy source in the world. And I believe that because diversity is part of the natural design of the universe. It's a beautiful, wonderful part of who we are. And that necessarily means there will be conflict. So conflict is a natural outgrowth of the grand, beautiful, wonderful design of the universe. So it can't be bad. It has to have a positive purpose. And compassion accountability is the mechanism through which we leverage the energy of conflict to create. I want to say that again. The conflict is meant to create, but we can destroy each other with it. It's like electricity. So we have to use that energy with care. And compassion accountability is a mechanism to turn the energy of conflict into creation.
Wow.
Which is what the purpose of compassion is to create anyways.
Right. So if we think about all or many of the giant problems in the world where we've created this kind of this side versus that side mentality, we're destroying each other, right? And so I love what you're saying about what if we all viewed conflict not as this evil thing and we're just black and white and we cancel each other out, but as this beautiful energy source and get creative and get curious about each other. Wow.
Yes. There's, if compassion means to struggle with, there are a lot of other ways we can struggle, and they all spiral. We can struggle against each other and turn every conflict into an adversarial win-lose. We can struggle instead of, which means we go do the work for people instead of letting them own their capability. We rescue. Or we can struggle alone, which means we carry these burdens inside and we don't ask for help. We don't tell anybody. We believe that maybe no one would care. No one's been through it. They're going to think I'm weak. So struggling against, struggling instead of, and struggling alone, they all end badly. But compassion is the alternative, which means struggle together.
Oh my God. All right. We're gonna shut it down there because this is genius. So Nate, thank you so much for the work that you and your team are doing in the world. I hope that everybody reads the book, and I hope that organizations work with you because we all need it. Where can people find you, and what's the next step?
Thank you for asking. We've tried to make it simple. One URL, compassionateaccountabilitybook.com, and it will take you to where my new book is. But also from there, you can go to places, get resources. And of course, we do consulting and assessment and training with organizations that want to bring this into their leadership teams and their cultures.
Awesome. Compassionateaccountabilitybook.com. This is Nate Regeir, one of the world's leading experts on compassion and accountability. I love it, love it, love it. Thank you, Nate, so much for being with us today. My friends who are out there, you're part of the Changing Work tribe. We are trying to change work from the inside out. Some calls to action, please follow us. Follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow myself. I'm Scott Shute. And we have lots more coming. We'll do these live events every other week where we're highlighting people who are trying to do just that, who are trying to change work and the world from the inside out. So once again, friends, thank you so much. Nate, thank you so much for the work you're doing and for being here today. I appreciate it.
It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much, Scott.
Take care, friends. Bye-bye.